Welcome to another TERF Talk Down Under. I'm Stassja and this is Ange. Hi, Ange.
Hi, Stars. Hi, everybody.
Fantastic news today. It just keeps coming from the UK. 1,000 families planning to sue the Tavistock Gender Clinic. That's massive. And what vindication for all the women and men like Graham Linehan who have been fighting this for years.
Yeah.
And hopefully, I'm pretty sure, it will come to Australia eventually.
Well, they will be paying attention to what is happening overseas. And at the moment, Daniel Andrews and the health department and the ministers and people like that are doubling down. But they can see what's happening in the UK and that the writing is on the wall. Yeah. So only a matter of time. And people aren't stupid. The people that they assume are on their side, which is people that are quite removed from this argument. It's not, it hasn't affected them yet, like normal people.
Yeah.
They read the news. They're going to be reading about this Tavistock clinic and thinking, well, hang on. We're getting all this pro-trans propaganda. We're getting, acceptance of children having medical procedures rammed down our throats, and they're going to start to question it. So I think there's going to be more and more of a pushback.
The media here, far out. It's still so far only the Australian has reported on this.
Yep.
In Age, instead of running a story on this huge scandal, they platformed. So I didn't even read it, so I don't know exactly what it was about. But they gave some genderqueer trans person an article in the Age last week.
About what?
I didn't even read it, so I don't know. About their gender journey and how hard it is to be trans and. I couldn't believe it, a bunch of idiots. But I do know that there are a couple of journalists that have been working on pieces. One is with the editor. It should be published this week. So wonderful Cindy Lever. I think it'll be published in the Daily Mail. And, thank God for the Daily Mail.
My daughter came home from school the other day and she said, another one's cut all her hair off and now once it's going by the name Kai or something. And she said one of the other kids in their grade, she's in year 8, one of the other kids, an autistic boy, of course, got in trouble for saying, you're not a man, I'm not going to do this. And the teachers didn't tell him off, but they said, it's important that you're kind.
Yeah.
And of course, I started ranting and my daughter goes, yeah, all right. And I'm going, if it was me, I'd be in that school. But, and I'm going to have a talk to that school about this stuff because my son is autistic. He's going there next year and he is not going to go into this bullshit. He's going to call a female a female. He's not going to buy into it. So, he won't be getting sent home from school or suspended or get a talking to over my dead body.
Wow. Oh, mate, can you possibly organise with other parents? Do you know how other parents feel about this stuff?
In the primary school, there's a very vocal bunch of primary school, mind you. There's a couple of vocal trans activists who wanted kids to wear pronoun pins.
All of them.
And I got it shut down. So there, most people agree with me, but I'm the only one that's willing to speak up about it because the other side, as we know, is so vocal and so nasty and so malicious and says all this disparaging stuff that has, it doesn't mean anything, and they just attack. And people don't want to subject themselves or their children to that. Most parents are worried about the impact on their children.
Yeah.
I am too, but oh well.
Yeah, it's bizarre how few people are willing to speak up.
Yeah, and kids don't get held kids aren't accountable for their parents. In this sort of situation. You know, they can just say, oh, look, my mum's old, she doesn't understand, or something like that. Like, it's not, they're not going to be hunted down and waterboarded because their mother's a TERF. It's just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Look, the other news out of the UK this week was that it's expected very soon that the trans prisoner policy is going to change. And so males will not serve time in women's prisons without ministerial sign-off. That's huge.
Yeah.
And that will make the minister personally responsible for any sort of assaults that happen as a result of placing women's prisons. So that's a massive win again, which is amazing. And here in Australia, there was I can't remember his name. It was an Indian name, sorry. A male psychiatrist has written a piece in The Spectator about what's happening in prisons, and he actually works in prisons.
Wow.
So that was good. And then the other news from Australia, Jessica Hoyle's been on Sky News a couple of times.
Yep.
I think she did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
And that has caused a shitstorm. It even got picked up by Pink News.
Venus News.
And of course, Out in Perth.
Out in Perth. They're the only publication who's stolen our content and credited us. So Out in Perth, thank you.
Hilarious. But the other news in Australia was just bizarre. So the the Adelaide Football League had a man play on a women's team. Some police officer over there in Adelaide made some comments about it, very reasonable comments. Basically, this is unfair. Mm-hmm. He wasn't even being rude or nasty. Like, he was just stating facts. Mm-hmm. And the response from the CEO of the Adelaide Football League, Mr. John Kernahan, was just over the top, ridiculous. He used the word sickened. He was sickened by these views. He called it vitriolic, if not archaic, views, and also used the word unsavory. It was just the most bizarre overreaction.
So, we have vitriolic and unsavory views if we say, as a woman, I'm uncomfortable with a trans-identified male in my change room while I get changed into my sporting gear. So that is the vitriolic point of view, apparently.
Oh, it was just ridiculous. And I tracked down his email address. I emailed him, and he wrote back pretty much, it looked like some sort of copy-paste job, leading with this statement saying, I never said that his views were transphobic. And it's like, mate, I never said that you said that his views were transphobic. And it was this really petty, passive aggressive, back and forth messaging me. His suggestion is that I attend the general committee of something like 70 different football leagues from around South Australia. Okay. and get up and state my views on why men shouldn't be in women's sports. So I might see if Kath Deeves will take that on, or maybe Narissa from Save Women's Sport.
Look, if we had a couple of weeks up our sleeve, we could take it on. If he's willing to put us up accommodation and stuff like that, maybe a road trip's in order.
It was just so strange. And he tried to, in his emails, he's trying to make out that he's just following orders. This is just the policies of the AFL that he's following. And it's like, well, why did you make such fucking inflammatory comments saying that you were sickened by these vitriolic and archaic views? What I think is going on there is, well, that's probably the first time that man has ever been at the center of a media storm. And he didn't know how to handle it. But he's probably been led to believe that this is a mainstream view that Australians hold, that males should be able to compete in women's sport. And it simply isn't.
And this police officer is now facing an inquiry by South Australian Police.
Yeah.
So potentially he could face disciplinary action, may even lose his job for his personal opinion. And I read what he said. It was so mild. It was just, this is not fair. Yeah. That's all he said. And yet all this hoopla about it. The poor guy, you know, and he's entitled to an opinion.
Mm-hmm. Just so outrageous.
But you look at all the back and forth, you know, when people say subjects like domestic violence, for example, you know, on the internet, there's, you know, the men's rights activists here and the feminists there and the moderates here and, you know, victims there and perpetrators here. And everyone's allowed to have an opinion, right? Even though it's a contentious issue, you know, you're still allowed to have an opinion. Trans ideology, it is their way or the highway. Nobody gets to have an opinion. Nobody gets to, you know, demonstrate an opposing view apart from their view, and that's it. And that's what's scary about it. And I really believe that most people are starting to notice. You know, they feel unsettled and they're thinking, well, I feel unsettled. You know, am I the only one? Because the opposing view is not in the mainstream.
They're fascists.
Yeah, they're totalitarian fascists.
Contrast all that Adelaide Football League nonsense with the Irish Gaelic football dude. Did you see that?
I didn't see that.
Oh,
oh, I did. Oh,
yeah. So he's like this full-on BDSM fetishist that's been allowed to play on the women's team because he calls himself a trans woman. He's freaking bald, has short hair, doesn't look like he's on hormones, I don't think.
Doesn't even wear female clothing, wears completely male clothing.
I pointed this out to Mr. John Kernahan at the Adelaide Football League, and he didn't even touch it, didn't respond to that part of my email at all. But you know, like just sacrificing women's sport for a male fetish. Come on.
Yeah, women got banned from Twitter for sharing that photo and for misgendering him.
Yeah,
they got banned. Aja got banned again for sharing that photo. And he looks like my dad, for God's sake. Yeah. Like, it looks like you know, a late middle-aged man with a bald head who's kicking a soccer ball with a bunch of young women. And that is an offence according to the Twitter androgynous admins. So
they've lost the plot.
Mm-hmm.
All right, our guests have arrived, so I'm going to bring them in. Very excited today to be introducing, well, our first ever international guests.
No.
Coming all the way from New Zealand. We have Katrina. Hi, Katrina and Suzanne. Hello, welcome.
Hi, Ange. Hi, Stassja.
Hi.
Nice to be here.
Yeah. We've got our
woohoo
t-shirts on.
Oh, I'm going to put in an order.
Suzanne designed those. They're good, aren't they?
They're awesome.
Yeah, we will sell them. We will be selling them on our website soon.
Excellent.
Just being busy with other stuff. You know how it is.
I collect turfy merch.
You'll be able to. That'll be valuable one day.
Yeah.
It's valuable today, actually.
Yeah.
It's getting like that. Yeah.
We're so impressed with your organising over there in New Zealand. I think it's a bit harder over here in Australia because we're so spread out. It's such a big continent. But tell us, what's the latest news from Speak Up for Women New Zealand? We've got a new vanguard.
We have, yeah. So it started, you know, you Speak Up for Women got together in 2018 when they started hearing the chatter and the whispers that the sex self-ID bill was coming in, you know. And because New Zealand is like is last in line to get everything, it was kind of I think they sort of were a bit more aware of how they had to sort of start organising around this and start doing some action. So then followed. It was passed. Well, it was tried to get passed, but then some politician. There was an MP who was a bit sort of eagle-eyed and stopped it, and then we were able to, delay it, and then we had a process of putting submissions in for it, which you might have seen. So those oral submissions, yeah, yeah, and it got passed in December 2021, but we did get a provision in it that single-sex spaces could still be provided. So that wouldn't have got there if it had been passed through the first time, and it was all sort of quiet and sneaky like it has been everywhere. Yep, and so Suzanne is currently in the process of writing sort of a guideline for service providers to show them how they can provide single-sex spaces still, because there's just so much confusion out there. They actually think, a lot of them think that they're not allowed to do that anymore. It's discrimination and all that. So yeah, so that I think that'll be really, really useful, and we'll try and spread it far and wide.
Does that clause also apply to service provision?
In what respect?
Like if you wanted to hold, say, a lesbian only event, would that clause apply to that, or is it just around spaces? Do you know?
That's an interesting thought.
It's all to do with the way we read it is to do with our Human Rights Act, which is what does allow us to discriminate in some circumstances if we want to provide a single-sex service. So we're kind of linking that in with the provision in the birth, deaths and marriages legislation that basically says that regardless of somebody's birth certificate, you can determine their sex on using whichever other information is available to you. So that, the usual way. I mean, we don't normally look at someone's birth certificate to decide which sex they are because, we just know. So that it's basically saying that still stands. You don't have to use the birth certificate. It's not the definitive, So it's how that gets interpreted across the different legislation in New Zealand, and it's all new and it's all untested. And what we're concerned with is what organisations are actually being told is discrimination. So it's kind of all work in progress, and it's all new. But we're hoping to have some guidelines that can offer clarity for people, so that the people that do want to provide single-sex spaces can do so knowing that it's lawful.
Yeah,
brilliant. Yeah, look, we're in Victoria, and we're probably the state that's gone the furthest with all this gender identity mania. And we had a local councillor here who she tried to get clarity around, well, is it lawful to still provide single-sex toilets by councils around Victoria? And she still has not been able to get a clear answer from any of the lawyers involved. Like one bunch of lawyers will say one thing, another bunch will say a different thing. The LGBT commissioner here in Victoria, they were unable to provide clarity. It's just such a mess. Yeah.
In New Zealand, it's going to take some sort of a test case. It's going to need to go before the courts. Someone either arguing that they've been discriminated against, or that they, want a single-sex service and have been denied one. There'll be something, we're not quite sure what yet. That will sort of put it all up there and say, well, actually, how do you determine somebody's sex? We have a Ministry for Women who say that actually
they don't define what a woman is. Actually, the chief executive has actually stated that we don't define what a woman is. I don't know, can't remember if she said any more or whatever. You know, women are defining themselves, she says. And we have a political party here. It's just a small one, and they're called the ACT Party, but they're quite the right wing, you know. And the way Labor's sort of going down in the polls, you know, there's talk that our National Party and the smaller one called ACT might sort of be able to join forces and get in. I mean, who knows? But anyway, the ACT Party wants to dismantle a few ministries in the government. And I'm thinking, gosh, you know, like if a ministry for women is one of them, they don't think it's necessary. And I'm thinking, if they've got a ministry who doesn't even define what they're for, I mean, crikey, they're playing right into their hands.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I saw just yesterday, I think Jacinda Ardern's popularity has plummeted. It's down to 30% or something, which is the lowest since she got in. Or
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's definitely been a shift, you know. She's not as popular as she was, and it's I don't think it's because of gender identity. For most people, it's all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's kind of at the front of our minds, but not for everyone.
Yeah. No, they're a bit. I think they're pushing. Some of the ideas aren't sort of bad, but they're pushing too much too soon, and it's all too sort of loose. You know what they're trying to get in there.
It's one of the first times we've had a proper majority government since we put MMP in. So they've got license to do whatever they want, really, and they kind of are. So it's showing, I guess, the weakness of MMP. Well, is it the weakness of MMP, or is it what we would have if we didn't have MMP, where you have one party in control? But we've kind of got used to having people being more accountable, and yeah.
What's MEP? Sorry.
MMP is it's
mixed member proportional.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we just have a single house. So and is it 120 something MPs? And some of them are based on the party that people vote for, and some of them are electorate based.
I think you call it coalition, don't you, in Australia? Is it? Yeah.
I think it's similar. Yeah. So for the most part, we've had coalitions. We've had it where one party's had to, you know, join forces with another one in order to form a majority, which has kind of slowed them down on what they can put through in any given term. Where this term, they had a majority, so they didn't need any extra support.
Yeah.
So basically, they come up with anything that they want put through, they vote, and it goes in.
See, we've had the Greens have had a surge of power here. So we not only have like a Labor government, but the Greens are feeling very emboldened, and they have some very extreme views. So yeah, we're a bit in trouble.
Yeah, our Greens were sort of, I think, at the forefront of identity politics, I would say. Do you think that's right, Katrina?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I think it was the former Minister for Women, Julianne Genter, wasn't it? She was a Green MP, and she was the one, I think, who decided that trans women had to be included in with women in the Ministry for Women's decision-making and policies and stuff like that. Although, you know, it's really hard to point to find anything where any actual decision was made, or, you know, or discussion or anything like that. It's just kind of came in like they do. These policies do.
It's just swept through our government departments. All the language has changed.
Yeah.
You know, you would have seen it where you are. You know, where it's just changed. We've got pregnant people instead of women, and we've got, you know, the usual sort of nonsense.
Yeah, men get given the word woman now, and women become people. Yeah.
Or menstruators.
Yeah.
So do you have, are all your gender clinics affirmation only for children too, and you have childhood transitions as well?
We don't really have clinics as such. We have, and we've got there's no record keeping. We don't have any idea really to the numbers. It's all kind of anecdotal. You hear of classes of students where there are 8 of them who are transgender, and just from knowing people who've got particularly daughters who are transitioning, and I think do we have any numbers, Katrina?
No, I think that's one thing that's it's pretty lacking. I do know that I think like a lot of places you find that there are places that have a sort of quite large numbers in a way, and then then there's places that have none, sort of thing, so like for example, I believe that here in Christchurch there is quite a large number because of a particular GP or medical centre.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any like gender clinics built into the hospitals over there?
No, I don't think so.
Don't think so. No.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah. Because our big gender clinic is the one here in Melbourne. It's attached to the Royal Children's Hospital, and then the Tasmanian, the Brisbane, and I think the Perth gender clinics all follow the model from Melbourne. So as a result of that, you would know Diana Kenny. She put in a bunch of freedom of information requests to those hospitals and was able to get some data, but we have no idea what's going on in the private system over here. So it sounds like you're in that boat. It's sort of I think
you seen the news about Tavistock, the lawsuit that
well,
it's unbelievable that New Zealand and Australia are just carrying on regardless. I would have thought they would at least be covering their asses by now.
Our Ministry of Health still says puberty blockers are safe and fully reversible. It still has it on their website. Except I haven't checked today. They might have taken it off today. But
same here. That's what the Royal Children's Hospital has on their website. Totally reversible.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy. Now, you were involved last week, probably for months now, in setting up this conference in partnership with I always forget, Child and Adolescent Therapists
Association.
That's the one. Thank you. CATA. How did that go?
Well, we didn't actually set the conference up. So I was one of the speakers. I was really speaking personally rather than for Speak Up for Women. I was asked to speak because I'm a lesbian, and I was also a gender non-conforming child who would probably have, been transed to within an inch of my life if I'd been born sort of 40 years later. So that's how I was speaking. So, but I was involved, obviously, as a speaker. I sort of knew what was going on in the lead up and everything, and it was quite extraordinary. The immediate kind of hatred and the amount of bad press about that conference, given that its purpose was to basically talk about gender health care. It was for therapists and teachers and parents and anybody who was sort of concerned about how to manage people with gender dysphoria or children with gender dysphoria. And they were definitely coming at it from a place of concern, and particularly with our new one piece of legislation is our conversion practices legislation. And they were interested, in how that would affect them as therapists or anyone sort of caring for children. So there's some really good legal advice on that.
That advice at the end that legal advice at the end was gold. Excuse me, as far as I'm concerned, I just thought, that would just relieve so many anxieties for therapists.
What was that?
Well, the main thing, I'll just find it because I had it in front of me a minute ago and then I tidied my desk, so I need to do that again. It basically, the main thing it kind of talked about was, well, not the main thing, but it mentioned the purpose of the legislation. And one of the things that really put people's minds at rest, I think, is the fact that that purpose is really important. So if you're deciding whether somebody has breached it, they look at what the legislators were thinking when they wrote it. And one of the purposes was to promote respectful and open discussions regarding sexuality and gender, which really leaves it open for people to do things other than just affirm, which is really important, because I think people were thinking that their only option if someone came to them and said, I think I'm born in the wrong body, was to sit there and nod and say, yes, well, of course you are. Of course you were. And that's not the case. Therapists can behave like health professionals and offer all sorts of care. And and that doesn't mean they just have to affirm.
Sorry.
I was just saying that's a relief.
Yeah, because here in Australia, what's happening is that children are presenting on a first visit to a GP clinic, and they're referring immediately to a gender clinic.
Yeah.
So since the conversion bills come in, nobody wants to touch these kids, straight into the gender clinic. And we all know that all the gender clinics are affirmation only. So it's had a devastating impact here in Australia.
Wow.
Do you think this Tavistock thing will make a difference? Can you see what point do you think that your gender clinics are actually going to?
Well, it's the media is complicit in all of this. Like, we've got a complete and utter media refuse to report on it, apart from the Australian, the mainstream media, and they're doubling down on all the trans stuff. Politicians are throwing money at trans orgs. They're having pride events everywhere. They're doubling down at the moment, but surely they can see that the writing's on the wall. I think, when someone, all it'll take is one of these journalists finally has the courage to report objectively on this issue, that'll be it.
They've all been tripping over themselves to do it as well. Yeah.
You do have Bernard Lane, though. I would have thought.
Yes. He's a national treasure.
Yes, we'd quite like him to come over here, with the pavlova and all that, and he could be our national treasure.
I genuinely think it's going to be legal cases. It's going to be transitioners, and I know for a fact that they are in the very early stages of evidence gathering at the moment. It is going to happen. But, it's going to take that. I cannot comprehend what is wrong with these politicians. They've been warned repeatedly over and over again that there is an issue here, and they're just like, oh no, there's not. No, those gender clinics are following the gold standard of care.
And the blueprint is the Tavistock, is the blueprint for the Melbourne Gender Clinic. So,
hello.
They got blood on their hands.
I know the politicians are really, really disappointing, but to me, it's the medical people. Who the whole first do no harm thing. I just can't get my head around their approach.
Agreed.
Well, it must be. I actually can't figure it out, because I can't believe they are all that greedy.
Because we do know that the language of trans activists is very emotionally manipulative, but still these are medical professionals, and who should be able to look past that and just look at the facts, but they don't. No.
That's what we rely on them for. That's why generally doctors and nurses and people dealing with paediatrics, especially, we rely on them, and I think they've let us down.
Yep.
Yeah. So what speakers did you have at the CATA conference, aside from yourself?
Well, I wasn't the keynote speaker.
Next year. I said next year.
Yeah, next year. Yeah. Well, we had Stella O'Malley, so she was amazing. I could just listen to her all day, and she did a talk that she's probably done before, And she was great. She talked about her own kind of experiences. She talked about the different approaches, affirmation, the watchful waiting, and then this sort of other one, which is I think it's called gender exploratory therapy or something like that. It's kind of self-explanatory. Probably the interesting thing she said was that, well, she said lots of interesting things, but the watchful waiting process, which is also self-explanatory, has kind of outrun run its course. It's no longer really viable because of the internet. So, while the parents are watchfully waiting, their child's in their bedroom reinventing themselves. So it's sort of impossible to wait because you're waiting, they're not waiting. So obviously the affirmation medicalization model is what Tavistock has been pushing. But the other one is more about exploring the reasons for somebody being uncomfortable with their body and their gender and all of those things. Which I guess, I'm not a psychotherapist, so I can't really talk about what it means, but I can kind of imagine what it would mean. Yeah.
And the thing was that most of us have felt really uncomfortable at puberty. I definitely remember not wanting to grow up, hating it. Yeah, somewhere between 15 and 16 years old, my mental and emotional maturity kind of started to get in line with what my body was doing. And, came right there. So it's all of us. It's not just kids today who hate. Sure, I think some of them, they're going through puberty earlier, I think, but it's not just, and that's pretty awful, really. But it's not just kids today who are suddenly getting this sort of gender dysphoria or whatever, or hating their bodies or hating what's happening. It's always been there.
Yeah, no one's looking at why are girls who 13, 14-year-old girls who weren't even necessarily tomboys or displayed any of that kind of tomboy stuff. Why are they suddenly thinking that they're boys? Why do they hate their bodies so much? And no one, they're massive issues. They're the same issues that gave us anorexia and cutting and all the self-harm stuff. So it's madness just to affirm it and say, congratulations, you're a boy. It's quite sad, and I think we're doing a massive disservice to those girls.
And the lesbians have disappeared too. There's all these trans men. Where have the lesbians gone?
Well, I'm still here, but
yeah, we know a few.
Yeah, I bet you do.
Yeah, but the young women, hardly any identify as lesbians. It's so sad.
Well, one of the things, so I was speaking sort of in tag team with another woman, Marg, who is about 20 years older than me. So I'm 50. I might be 51. I am 51. And she's 20 years older than me. And she, her kind of cohort basically meant that when I came out in the early 90s, life was fantastic. There was so much happening if you're a lesbian. There were this lesbian, they weren't everywhere, obviously, but for me, it felt that way. There was certainly a lot of visibility.
Ray Marg was talking about, the dynamics of all these women just being together and lesbians. You sort of think, oh, that doesn't sound too bad. Sounds quite good, actually.
It had its moments, but so it was. I sort of grew up in that. I got the benefit of people like her. So I was talking about that. I was talking about my childhood, because as a young child, I was Jonathan. So. And I was kind of left alone, and eventually Jonathan sort of, was gone. And so, because it's really made me question the difference between myself and my own childhood and what these kids are going through, 6 and 7-year-olds, when you read about their parents saying, describing their child. And the first time I sort of looked at it, I was expecting to hear these stories that were very different to my own. And they're not. They're almost identical. There's nothing remarkable. They like playing with boys. They like boys' toys. They don't like pink. They don't like flowers. They want short hair. and I was sort of waiting for the extra things, like and and they don't come. So I found it really interesting. So we spoke, but before us, Diana Kenny spoke, and she talked about sexual and gender development in children, which was quite interesting. Sort of just the ages and the processes that they go through, and she was good. And then we had kind of a panel with we had a couple of parents who've got transgender kids, their stories, and then we had a couple of detransitioners. Really sad, and then we had a couple of lawyers who went over some of the impacts of the legislation, and that was a really good. So it was a great day. It was pretty full on, but I think the people that attended, I think, got heaps out of it.
I attended online, and it was great. Yeah, absolutely great. I think they're going to make it available, are they? Is that correct, Suzanne?
I think so. I think they'll edit some of it, but yeah, the idea is that it's available because they had so much backlash. They had people who were too scared to sign up for it. Yeah. And the idea is that it gets out there, so it can be made available, I think, for free. Which is great. Yeah.
Well, in the lead up to it, I did read an article. I can't remember where or what publication, but the journalist said towards the end that he was going to attend and report back, and I haven't seen anything since. So you haven't either?
No.
Bummer.
No. We had one Radio New Zealand journalist who was supposed to attend who couldn't in the end. She was busy.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so the trans activists tried to have the venue cancel the event on you, didn't they?
They did. So we had an original venue, which was a sort of, Nelson's quite a small place, but it's got a little sort of city, and there's a hotel there, and that's where it was going to be. And to be fair, that venue held firm. They weren't going to cancel. But in the end, the organisers decided to move somewhere that was easier to manage if people did, and they kept it secret up until the night before.
Ah, right.
Yeah. So we didn't have any protesters.
Oh, well done.
On site. They didn't know where it was.
No, but I think they came out the next day or a few days later or something. Sit on the side of the road. Sit on the side of the road, and the MP for Nelson was gushing all over them, and and you are loved, you're welcome here, this is your home,
Yeah, don't worry about those nasty TERFs.
Yeah. So
so just the usual stuff. So, but no, it was a good conference, but just the lengths they had to go to get it to happen, and the ridiculous kind of press around it just shows you how badly they want to stop us from being heard.
What gets me with the media is like they are missing what the scandal actually is. Like the scandal is what's happening to children, and you're making the fact that you're running this conference. Oh, that's a scandal.
I know.
Yeah. I think they're looking in the wrong direction for the scandal.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think they're totally misguided. But it is going to be interesting. One of the speakers had this quote. I'm just going to find it. And she kind of misquoted it, but I found what the quote was, and because how you sort of wonder how it's all going to end and how we've got to this madness. And it's a guy called Charles Mackay who he wrote in 1841. He wrote a book called Extraordinary Popular Delusions and About Madness of Crowds. And what he said was that men, it has been well said, think in herds that will be seen that they go mad in herds, while they only recover their senses slowly, one by one. And that's 160 years ago. But I think it's still what we're seeing is it's been this mass sort of hysteria, and that the getting out of it is going to be more gradual. Yeah, people will just drop off one at a time, or come over to the TERF side.
Yeah, I can completely appreciate that. I was very much stuck in sort of new age thinking and chasing healing. And like for years, I was stuck in that way of thinking. And no one could have talked me out of it. No one could have convinced me, come back to reality. You actually have to, eat well if you want healing, things like that. And I can see it with people that are trans activists. There is no arguing with them. There's no point in arguing with them. They have to come out of it themselves.
And the kids, yes. I mean, I've heard the same thing about, like a detransitioner being asked, what could we have done to have changed your mind, or so that you've done something different? And they said nothing. You couldn't have done anything.
That's right. It's very sad.
Yeah.
So all we can do is keep doing what we are doing and be there for when people change their mind.
Yep.
And not to say, woohoo, told you so, but to support, That's kind of.
So we have and once the sex self-ID bill becomes law, which is about mid next year, there's a statutory review in 5 years' time. And we're thinking, oh, well, that's good. Give us time to collect data and present it and, show the impacts and all that sort of thing. And then it turns out, I just found out recently, they're only going to review the processes. So this is another thing that we'll have to sort of campaign on, is that, well, actually, we want a system, something official that people can actually sort of tell their stories about how it's impacting them. Going to the gym and there's a man in the change room just sitting there, and you can't, and the women are told they can't do anything because he's transitioning. And stories like that. And so we did somehow we came away believing that they were going to collect these stories or provide an avenue or something like that. And we have to sort of go back and now look and see what exactly was said for us to come away with this understanding that this is going to happen. And then we find out, well, actually, no, it's not, so that's another campaign that we'll have to do.
That's frustrating, yeah.
Well, you know that Dr. Holly Lawford-Smith has that no conflict, they said, website exactly for that purpose, because she realised that nobody was collating that data.
Yeah, I think it's just about, I'm not sure it's the only one. It's only one in this neck of the woods anyway.
Yeah.
But we have to have sort of, like specific New Zealand stories, of course, because then they'll say, oh, well, that's not New Zealand. Even though on the other hand, they'll say that they adopt international best practice on other things, so.
I think that website is actually going to be used. I think there's some New Zealand involvement in it now. Don't quote me on that, but I've got a feeling someone was asking whether people from New Zealand could help with it. So there might be a way of collating the data through that's already set up.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Something that was really quite confronting for me and very moving was when when you were having your little hearings about self-ID, and the Manawahini Carrero girls were talking about the impact of gender identity on Maori culture. That was like, I was in tears, like, seriously, and when they start talking about that stuff, I don't know how anyone can't be confronted by it and how it is a form of colonization. So that's something, and it's happening here in Australia, but we don't have any Aboriginal voices at the moment about that. But those women, what they were talking about was very powerful.
And Michelle from Manawahini Carrero is going to actually sort of write a little bit of a series for us on the cultural impacts and aspects, and how it's just nothing to do with Maori.
Fantastic.
So that'll be good.
On your show, you should have.
You've had Michelle on your show.
Michelle,
first guest. She was your first guest, wasn't she? Yeah. She was good too. I listened to that. I listened to that just recently, actually, because I started following you a little bit later. I listened to her and I thought, she's good. Yeah.
I looked back at some of our old episodes the other day. Oh my God. But we're still here. Michelle was very brave coming on.
Yeah.
And she's a great speaker. Yeah, she's
Yeah.
a great talker. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Keep in touch. Let us know
Mm.
any significant developments over there. We'd love to have you back on to have a chat about them. So yeah.
Sure. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
I'd like to buy a t-shirt.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
One t-shirt on order, Suzanne.
Women's size 10, thank you.
Okay. I'll let you know when the website, when the ordering's up on the website. Thank you.
Right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See
Okay.
ya.
Keep up
Bye.
the good work.
Bye.
Bye. Brilliant. That was good. It's good to connect with, our siblings across the water.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I'm getting quite the collection of TERFy t-shirts. They're all black, of course. Yeah, I'm a bit too scared to wear my adult human female one, but the rest of them I wear, and people don't realise. Like, I've got an IWD Brisbane, I've got a heap of TERFy t-shirts, and people don't know what they're about. So they just reminisced.
God, when we did the Hobart Forum, I wore my adult human female t-shirt, and then afterwards we all went out to a pub, and and I'm a smoker, unfortunately, and I've gone out into the smoking area alone wearing my adult human female t-shirt, and it was then that it dawned on me. I was like, fuck, I'm a target.
Yeah.
Here by myself, and anyone has a go at me and they're drunk, and I felt unsafe.
Yeah.
I did though.
Crazy that a t-shirt in Melbourne or Hobart can make you unsafe.
Yeah.
Crazy. But speaking of which, we are thinking of having a little speakers corner around the fact that the government here in Victoria is ignoring the CAS review. So if you're interested in attending, let us know.
Email us.
Yeah.
Our email address is in the description, terftalkdownunder@gmail.com.
Yep, or pop into my Twitter. If we follow each other, then we can send each other messages.
Yep. Well, I think that's pretty much a wrap. Any final bits and bobs? Bill Grove is on Insight next week.
Yes, she said she's a little bit worried that everybody else, or the trans activists, got to speak and she only got a tiny little grab. So we'll see how that pans out. I think it's something to do with language, the erasure of language and other stuff. So yeah, we'll see. I was very surprised that they asked Sal to represent the gender critical voice, and good on her. But if they try and portray her in a negative light, I'll be very annoyed, because as we know, Sal is in the immediate postpartum period after having a baby. And if they're going to demonise her and make her look bad on national television, I'm not going to be impressed. But anyway, maybe they won't. Maybe she will sound like the voice of reason. That's what we're hoping.
So that's Tuesday on SBS. All right. I think that's everything. So thank you to all our viewers. Please like, share, subscribe if you haven't already. And we'll see you again next week.
Great.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.